but you'll see what I mean. Hello, y'all. Christian White, the One Day at a Time Dad, presenting Listening to Learn, a series designed to discover solutions to community issues through the voices of lived experience. I am here with Miss Brianna.
It's great to be here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, first, tell me a little bit, where you're from, your background, how you grew up, what was the environment like inside the household?
Yeah, so I'm Brianna. I'm born and raised in Boston, and my mother is an immigrant from Haiti, and my dad was born and raised in Roxbury. And he is like totally Boston. He was very, very into music. He was a DJ for a lot of his life. And my mother is an educator, and my dad also is in law enforcement. So he's in the court system. He's a court officer. So I come from public service, so naturally I went into wanting to, provide some service to people for their lives and their livelihood. I have 3 sisters. I'm in the middle, and we are the closest family. I'm so close to my sisters. It's crazy. My oldest sister, I look just like her. People used to get us confused and think we're twins.
Now, was that something that your mom and dad instilled in y'all? Was always family first in a sense?
Yes, always family. My house was always the house that my cousins came to. We were 10 to on the floor in the living room, and we always were super close. And we still to this day we're all super close. But that's something that my parents definitely instilled. And then I think why I kind of got into the field of service. I was involved in MECO, and my younger sibling that's directly under me, she didn't get into MECO. And from my understanding, I think it's because she had an IEP. She was dyslexic. And seeing, because we're not that far apart in age either, so seeing the fact that I was in MECO and I got all these resources and all this funding, I can go to this place for free and these experiences, and her being in BPS, she didn't quite get the same resources as me. I would have to share a lot of things with her, or the experience I shared when I came home was you went to this other world type of thing. That's when I realized the true inequities in education in particular. So that's why I got into community organizing, because I've seen it in my household.
And how old are you?
I'm 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the sister directly under me is 22. Yeah, so I got to see it firsthand. I was like, why don't you have books? Or why is the books falling apart? Or stuff something simple as that. And that's kind of how I got into community organizing initially, because having a sister that struggles with learning disabilities, I was like, why isn't she given better resources, or why isn't she getting the same resources I may get, so I'd seen that. I was like, we gotta do something about this. So MECO is honestly always pissed with me, but I really want to make sure that we're getting to the resources of the people that really need it, and the students that really need it. So
how important do you think it was for you to have those experiences, the new experiences, being able to travel outside the city? How do you feel like those affected you?
Honestly, it was, I feel like seeing how people view you could be very detrimental to how you view yourself. So initially, I was, one of the few Black kids in a predominantly white school, and they viewed me as the cool rebel. So I started acting out. I started, getting in trouble. I was the guy, talk back, but I always was with that, I was always getting straight A's. So they were very perplexed by how I was able to do both. You're this bad kid, but you're getting good grades.
Now at home, were you that rebel?
No, completely opposite. Completely opposite. I literally was very lively, funny. I definitely don't think the two people exist. They weren't the same person. But I also think that lends into code switching.
And that's what I'm wondering. Did you feel like were you aware that you were trying to fit in a sense?
No, I didn't think I wasn't able to identify that I was doing that. So definitely later on in life, I was like, why was I acting like that? So I think those were talents that I'm glad I learned because I'm able to apply them, you know, today. Because I'm like in certain environments, like especially when I definitely went to a PWI after high school. I was able.
What is that?
Oh, predominantly white institution,
Okay.
so white college.
Okay.
Yeah. I was able to be like, at that point, I was like, I no longer want to code switch because I identified that I was doing it, and now I am only my authentic self, like in spaces, because I feel like that's like my form of protest. Like I went natural because I was like, I'm not doing this like how you know view and you want to stereotype or push your European style of beauty on me.
How did you come to the conclusion that you were code? Yes.
So I realized I was doing it when, to be honest, my white friends were almost like replicating what I was doing. Like they were starting to think certain things were okay because I was doing it.
Yes. Understood.
Yeah. So I was just like, that's not okay. That makes me feel uncomfortable. And once I started feeling completely uncomfortable, I was like, no, I gotta change. So once I realized that there's more power and more, you know, just more like comfortability in like being yourself, I was like, I just have to because it's too much. It's just also exhausting. Code switching is exhausting. You never know what environment to do it in. And once you're just 100% yourself in every space, it just makes life easier and simpler.
So what do you do for work right now?
So I'm the Civic Engagement Director for Counselor Michelle Wu, and I also work with Ruth Rollins with her nonprofit called We Are Better Together that really kind of supports communities that have been impacted by violence on the spectrum of violence and people that have previously been incarcerated. So that's some of the work I do. Yeah.
What is the community? So what exactly do you do for Counselor Wu?
So I make sure that mainly communities and groups that have not been traditionally engaged by government, make sure they're engaged and make sure that they're informed.
Engaged by government or engaged by government in an
appropriate way.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because
Okay.
we see communities of color or like the disabled community or different groups not being engaged how they should be by government. And my particular role and the responsibilities that lie with the role is to make sure that they are informed and engaged, but also that they're informing us and that they are engaging with us. So a lot of the things that I'm responsible for is making sure that conversations that I have in community translate into policy. So I work closely with our policy director because policy comes from people's, alleviating, people's stress and people's everyday situations and addressing, things that happen in their daily life and figuring out how then can we translate that into policy so we can help, the masses, like whoever is impacted by that in particular. But yeah, that's definitely like in a nutshell, like what I'm responsible for, but definitely making sure I'm engaging with different identity groups.
And what identity groups do you try to engage with the most? What do you see as like more pressing to reach a particular group of people as opposed to another? How do you go about choosing to go about your day and who you're going to engage?
Well, I definitely engage with everyone that has, like traditionally, like I said, hasn't or have a deep distrust in government, especially as a Black woman coming from, being a daughter of an immigrant. Those communities obviously I hold so dear to me, so the immigrant community and the Black community, because it's how I personally identify. But I make sure that I'm hearing the stories of different walks of life. Like I could never know how it feels to be from the Asian community or or the disabled community or certain other communities, but I bring that same passion to each group because they all need to be heard because we see that they're not being heard and we see that they're not being engaged with at the same.
Let me ask,
Yeah.
Can you define community?
Community. So I view community as someone that's groups of people that have like shared interests or shared experiences, but they also have there's like one streamline of similarities between the communities. So when I'm referring to like identity groups, that's what I mean. But community in the general sense is just people together, because like a neighborhood could be a community, and within that you can have different socioeconomic groups, you can have different religions. So that's like a makeup of a whole community. But when I refer to like identity groups and like how they identify, it's like the one similarity that they have that makes them being able to like relate or not relate, or
now was
share
working
something.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now when you first started working for Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
were you intimidated by, I guess, the atmosphere?
Not necessarily, because actually, what do you mean by that?
Meaning, did you feel like you were starstruck? Did you feel like you were in a house of power? Did you?
Ooh, that's a great question. So honestly, and I say this all the time, like I usually fangirl over people that are within my community. So I was obviously like, really just empowered by working for a woman of color, and I was like, wow, this is like the first time I've ever had to do this. Like my teachers were white, my previous employers were white, and now I'm working for a woman of color. I'm like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And also just the environment that she cultivates is empowering each of her staff members. Like anything I want to do in my personal life, I'm like, what do you think about this? Like, have you experienced this? And that's something that I think your work is important in your work in your work culture. But I don't think I was ever like intimidated, because I felt empowered. And honestly, a lot of the reason why I started kind of some offhand conversations through Uplift and Impact was because of my feeling when working in my workspace with Michelle, is that I was empowered to, embolden my voice even more as a black woman from Boston. So,
how often within City Hall does somebody encourage you personally to run for office?
Within City Hall?
I think because I wonder, like when I talk to young people or anybody, my peers, anybody, I let them know like the realities. You can hold the jobs of the people that you work for.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder, within the culture of City Hall, are the people that are in power promoting their staff to take their place?
Honestly, I would say like City Hall within my office, or City Hall within.
I guess in general, but it can be personal in that sense.
I feel like I mentioned earlier, I've always felt emboldened to like do anything I want to do. Like I've never expressed interest in running for office, so that's never have been something that someone's like encouraging me to do. But anything from like little like convening people, convening conversations, or solution-based conversations, or things like that, I've always been empowered to do that. From my peers, from my supervisors, and that's like I've never experienced like, oh no, you can't do that. And I'm like, why not? I've never experienced that piece in City Hall. No.
How often does a politician actually go with? That's what when I asked about the community, I think that's what I was getting at. Where, so let's say you're in a meeting. The topic is fruits and vegetables. You have 30 opinions of fruits and vegetables. 10 of the opinions have donated to the campaign, fully support. Another 10 people share stuff on social media, they try to support that way. Then you have the last 10 people whose voices, everybody has a great opinion, but they just randomly text, randomly sear, randomly whatever the case may be. When you're in a room, a decision needs to be made. It's coming from the community. There's 30 different opinions.
Why quotations?
It's meaning because I want to be clear on, because I agree within the different identity groups, if all of them have an opinion and want something done, how does a politician go about making a decision around that? Whose voices actually get heard?
So I think that in this particular, honestly, that's a great question. So I think in my particular role, I am responsible for getting and convening voices that aren't traditionally heard or at the table. So,
and what does that mean? Tell me a voice that's not traditionally heard.
So, like, for example, a single mother that can't make hearings. Like, I can't make hearings 9 to 5. Like, I can't watch council meetings. Like, they're too long. Like, I can't. I have to put my children to bed. Now they're remote learning. I have to make sure they're on task, and I want to be engaged with city council, but I can't watch a council meeting. So one, having something like the council notes that Michelle always does, which is a debrief. But basically, communities that just have barriers that inhibit them from engaging in the ways that government assigns or government makes. So, like I said, attending hearings, stuff like that. So my responsibility, and this is why I work sometimes later at night, because I'm calling at 8 p.m. Like, I'm calling these mothers that might have 30 minutes at the end of the day, but they don't, because they put their kids to sleep. Or the father that works 12-hour shifts, and he got a lunch break now, so I can call him now. But making sure that I'm debriefing communities that haven't been engaged with on what's going on in the city council, and how do you think that is and getting their opinion on it. Do you think that's something we should be investing in? Is this is something that we should be looking harder into? And I think the decision making process is definitely not a perfect one, but I do think it's making sure that before decisions are made, we're holding public conversations and public dialogues, but also making sure that we're having those one-offhand conversations, consolidating that information, and then going to the drawing board and saying, so this is what are the similarities in the answers and the solutions, and how can we make sure this best addresses the masses, the people that are the most impacted. And then other pieces too, within Michelle in particular, she always comes with the voices of the most vulnerable in her mind. She always makes sure that is where she's operating first and foremost, because they can't, when she's making a decision, when she's making a vote, they can't, like I said, they're not watching the city council meeting because they're literally trying to, they're working 3 jobs to live in Boston because it's rent is so damn high.
Or they're sleeping on methadone mile right now.
Or that. So the fact that we need people in power that bring those vulnerable voices and vulnerable populations in the room without even actually necessarily having to talk to them, that is something, that's the most powerful piece of decision making. But yeah, I think the other piece is just tradition, walking on methadone mile, walking on Mass and Cass, walking down communities that have been
Congress Square. Anyway.
Yeah, so you just got to get where the people are, and that's one of my responsibility is, because the people that are engaged already have been engaged. We know what they want. They have been engaged. It's easy for them to do. They can take 3 hours out of their day, but getting the people that can't, that's who we need to be advocating for.
And how do you do that? How do you get people who just either don't care, don't have the time to actually get up and vote?
So that's the golden, I feel that's the answer to the external question of how does the world work? I don't know. But I think the best way is making the correlation, or helping them make the correlation that they have skin in the game. So you are you are a single, I know a lot of single mothers. I don't know, so I keep going back to single mothers. But for example, you are a single mother, and right now remote learning is something that is a very big issue for you. If you make the correlation that this is what the city council could do on the education process, and you're oh, so now I have stake because I have a child.
But let me ask, realistically, how many of the groups you're talking about that don't engage, first and foremost, even know what a city council person does? That's because I feel like when we talk about oh, I know I might have some. It comes with you're aware of what that is.
Right.
So somehow you knew that.
Right.
But I mean, I bump into people all the time and they really have no clue what a city council person is.
To that point, I feel like, especially now during COVID, and the uprise in, you know, us seeking, you know, racial justice and us seeking racial equity, a lot of people are paying a lot more attention to what's happening on the city level. So I've seen myself being able to like we have to start from the basics now. Like, what is the city council actually responsible for? So like one of the biggest things that, you know, people were paying attention to was the budget vote, because it was like, wow, this is what the city council does. Like, so I think making the connection between, you know, the city councilor, one, like, for example, people were surprised that, you know, Michelle or any of the city councilors live directly up the street from you. Like, you could literally pull up to their house. Like, and I think that one reality is like, wow, they live like near me. Like, cool. Like, but making sure that communities are aware of like what the city council does is the basics. Like, and that is what we're missing.
Because it always struck me as odd, and like, I don't know, maybe I'll even probably suggest it, but it's like, I would love to see 30-second videos explaining a certain point, or I don't have time to listen to a city council meeting. I mean, which I feel like is probably designed because only very few people can actually engage in city council meetings. But I wonder if like politicians in general could actually teach what they do. Like, literally, this is who I am. This is my job. This is what I'm responsible for. This is what I'm held accountable for. This is what, like, I never understood why there wasn't like a direct conversation. Like, this is what I do.
Honestly, let's make it happen. What you mean? Like, let's make it happen. I think with new, I mean, I know for me personally, education, and I don't mean school, but just learning what people did, learning why is that person important? Right.
You know, why are they all going surrounding him or her, or why? What do they do? And you take the time to learn that, and then if they feel like somehow you can collaborate or whatever, then you do so.
And honestly, that is completely, like, that makes so much sense, and that's also so important.
It's so doable.
Yeah, because the other piece is like, people think that, you know, electeds or certain officials are responsible for something, and they're not.
Yes.
So that's the other piece.
I think of like someone like Rachel getting blamed for something the police do.
Right,
it's
like that's not the same.
She's not a police officer.
Yeah,
exactly. Talk to Gross.
So that's why, exactly. So informing is will break down a lot of barriers, and I think that like having that level of knowledge would be, you know, important across the board, because then it teaches you how to collaborate. Like, it's like, okay.
I think for me, what it really teaches people to become involved, as opposed to I need a vote right now. So what do you need in your community? How can we better this? You never saw me before. You might not see me again, but if I run again, you'll see me again. So bank on that. But it's like, I wonder if like throughout the process, it can be the whole process itself can be demystified. Where it's like, you know, I know you're working on, so like, let's say I'm Michelle. Hi, I'm Michelle. You know, I'm Boston City Councilor at large. This is what I'm responsible for. These are the districts. This is what I try to do. This is what my staff helps me to do, because I can only be in so many places.
Right.
I feel like there should be way more like
transparency with that. Yeah.
Transparency with that, because I want young people to hear that and say, I want to be that.
Right. Right.
They get to make decisions like that. I want to do that. Whereas opposed to it's contact when necessary.
Like when you're already in crisis, when you're already.
Yes. Like, I want to see the grooming you talk about throughout, and I feel like educating people on exactly what politics is. Yeah, demystify it.
Right. And that's something that I always talk about, like, amongst my friends. I'm like, you know, there's so many groups that like they'll have Thanksgiving dinner and be able to talk to a senator. Like, I don't have that luxury, so I had to learn all this on my own. Like, I had to figure it out myself. But I think that should be readily available to anyone, because it's like you're part of the community. You're part of the direct impact and groups that these elected serve. So you should easily be able to, you know, be able to be educated on what their responsibilities are, what they do, and what their staff does. That's another big point. Like,
yeah, and I mean, well,
there's
because
people behind them, yeah.
And that's what I think is people don't talk enough about, because the reality is I mean, what politician literally has time for my personal ventings? Not many. So I mean, I think it is important to kind of make this is I feel like there's just not enough interaction with all groups in the community. The ones who know, they know. The ones who don't, they just stay ignorant. And it's like, yeah, and we stay the same.
So how do you think that you educate the masses or make people care about?
Well, I mean, first of all, people have to know what it is you do.
Right.
I mean, first and foremost, because people need to know how you can benefit them.
Right.
Or not benefit them. I mean, if I'm on the street selling drugs, the cops probably don't benefit me. But they'll benefit me if they took out my competition for me, then they benefit me. It's different, it's a different viewpoint, but either way, it involves, I know the function of what this person does. They have to know what it is you do. If I don't know what you do, but you're asking me for something, you're already telling me that you're just asking because you need it at that moment. It comes with the territory.
And I think that's an important piece too, like actually explaining and educating on, our responsibilities creates a long-lasting relationship. That's a longevity of a relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Instead of, okay, this moment I'm talking about this topic, and I know you are involved, right? Like, you may have been impacted by this.
Yes.
But if I tell you everything I do and what I'm responsible for, then you can interact with me on multiple levels.
Exactly. And I feel like sometimes the approach is already closed off. It's not open enough to invite anything that you weren't there to hear. And I feel like that could be, I mean, honestly, I feel like all of these council people should be, I mean, and not just, selectmen, select women, school committee, explain what it is you do. Explain it. It was interesting. So I had interviewed Anissa Wasabi George, who's another city councilwoman, and she said something that struck me. It was interesting. We were talking about the crack era, the opioid era, the word crisis, the public health, all these sorts of things. And we were talking about just the way money flowed in, all of that. And what really struck me was I could see she's a very competitive person, which in and of itself doesn't mean anything. But I proposed, I'm like, look, in these, if competition brings out the best in everybody, and everybody competing at their best brings out the best naturally within that competition, then we should be providing better services to certain communities in the hopes of making them more competitive, which it only is going to make you better, because you'll see new levels of competition that you didn't know were there, and you'll have to become better.
Right. The iron sharpens iron, yeah.
That's sort of like, that's kind of what I want. That's the perspective I want people to sort of have on, well, why do we even need to help these people? Because you really be helping yourself. Right,
exactly.
You really be helping yourself.
Exactly.
And that's where I feel like the disconnect happens, is a lot of politicians don't see it as, I'm helping myself. And only to the extent that they actually get into the seat. But helping themselves on a personal level. Like in my mind, like when I have these conversations, I learn something new about me, and I apply it if it's supposed to be applied.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or someone could say something and it's like, wow, I didn't realize that still affected me after all these years.
Right.
But I don't just act like it didn't. I feel like so many people in the positions of power, you can affect them. You can have a moment where you break through, but then it's like, the job. I can't afford to think about that. I can't afford to feel for that.
Right.
It's interesting how that works. I love politics, but I hate it.
What do you love and hate most about it then?
I love the fact that you can actually create a system that puts you on a different playing field than other people. I mean, first of all, capitalism invokes a bottom tier. Automatically.
Yeah.
Automatically. What I don't like about it is in some ways, is that me and everybody I know are on that volunteer. But that's a big disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the level of uncaring that you kind of have to have. And you know, like I made a post and someone like kind of got upset with me and were like, well, you don't know Biden.
What did you say?
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to even remember
Right.
what I think I might have asked if like Ruth Ginsburg had black staff. That's what I think the question was.
Mm-hmm.
And someone reached out and they were like, well, you can't say that because you're a man. And I'm like, anybody in a position of power can be held accountable by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just reality. Anybody in the world can be held accountable by anybody.
Right.
That's just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting and we talked about this earlier, where somehow people believe like these characters are new,
Mm-hmm.
that they're fresh,
Yeah.
that they haven't been behind so many of the policies and all that
Mhm.
have come to.
They have a track record.
They have a track record.
That's why a lot of like when it comes to election time, it's like a lot of people, you have to do your research, like it, because they're not new to the game, but they're new to applying for this particular position.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so what I do like about politics is I like, and you brought it up earlier, kind of in your personal story when you said with the code switching. Once you realized what you were doing,
Mm-hmm.
you changed it, but you didn't get rid of the lessons it taught you.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, for many years, I couldn't be in a room with people I didn't like and it not show.
Right.
It would always show.
Right.
But with what you're talking about, you kind of learned early on.
Mm.
Oh,
Thank God I did.
I need to be playing this.
Right.
There's a level of, you know, we might agree on this, but we sorely disagree on that.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do I navigate that?
Mm-hmm.
And to be quite honest, I feel like so many young people, that's where the key is. How do we get them to connect moments in time?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get them to see why this action is important if you want to get this done?
Right.
There's such a disconnect in the everyday thinking. I'll give you a perfect example. Maybe, I don't know, 8 months ago now, maybe longer than that. A young kid called me up and he was like, you know, Jake, homie, I just got shot at and my girl was in the car with my kid and you know, and I'm like, okay. So I'm just listening, I'm like, is that it? Like, that's all that happened? He was like, well, you know, earlier in the day I had spin through their block and I'm like, wait a minute. So you're in the same car that you did something in earlier in the day. And he's like,
Right context.
and he's like, yeah. But he's like, I got my girl and my kid right now. I'm not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's these moments in time where you actually believe each moment is separate. Not. And I feel like you caught that earlier than a lot of people catch it. And I feel like a great tool would be to, I don't even know how it would look, but to promote ways for people to make better connections within themselves and with each other.
Right.
You know, that's sort of how I see it.
And that's an important piece because and I also think, I don't know how old this guy was, but it could be a generational piece too, because it's like,
I mean, we're talking late 20s.
Okay, yeah, same. Yeah, it's literally, I feel like my generation, we don't see past like a certain like thought, like a certain like time. I don't know.
Few do.
Right.
But many don't.
Right.
And it's many of them that are not voting. It's many of them that don't care to, even though they have the time.
Right. Like, and a part of it is making that correlation, like, especially at the local level, it's like, what do you actually do? People know what people actually don't know what the president does, but they know what the president has this ultimate, you know, responsibility or power, whatever. So it's easier to like get to make the correlation of like, you need to vote for your president because he literally does everything. Like he's responsible for everything. But making the connections on the ground is important. But I think that piece is really important. Like these moments of time connect. So then how do you then, because once you make that connection, that's when you start to be like, oh, this is how I provide a solution because I know the whole context of the situation.
Yes.
Versus like, but you were earlier, they seen you earlier in the same exact car. So that's an important piece that,
and
we tend to purposely forget.
Yeah, and that can be magnified to many different
Right.
worlds in terms of people not making those connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the difference between this group of people and some of like the politicians or whatever, they are making those connections.
Right.
So they're automatically moving, where some others might just be staying stagnated. And that's where I would like to see a lot of the change, where we're actually involving people, involving them. We're telling them this is the job description. We're telling them this is what we do on a daily basis. We're telling them, look, I would love to have a conversation with you personally, and maybe we could set that up somehow, but this is why I can't do that right now. Because I'm here, there. Do you want to
know why? The explaining, and this is honestly something that I honestly learned through my sister. She just had a child, and she's like, she doesn't ever tell her child no. She explains why. And the reason why that's important is because...
Whoa, you mean she does tell her no,
well, she does, but she explains why. Yes. She just doesn't say like no. She'll be like, you can't have this because it'll hurt you, or you can't eat this, or whatever. But the reason why is so important is because it provides the context, and it provides perspective, and it provides clarity. If we keep telling people no, you can't have this, no, they're gonna get riled up. They're gonna make sure they'll just feel oppressed. Like, you can't just keep telling people no without why. And then once they figure out the why, and then once the why is told to them, it's like, okay, so this is how I would actually find the solution to my problem. Because until you know the why, you just are floating, and it's like there's no real
and you know what? I'm glad she said that, because now I get to pull her card. We were talking about the word senseless, and this is exactly what we're talking about. So many in that position would assume that it's senseless,
right?
But there's a why there.
And you definitely informed me of that.
Yes. So we were talking about, a lot of people tend to use the word senseless in direct relation to violence. And, I believe that is the worst word, the most damaging word you can use to describe anything. Because for me, it takes it out of the realm of accountability and responsibility, and puts it in the realm of, we can't understand that. It's just senseless. Punish.
There's a reason.
Yes. If you don't take the time to ask somebody, why did you do that? And they may not even know why. But if you don't take the time to even inquire, you're not looking for a solution. You're looking for a remedy to an immediate problem.
Right. And it's important to know the why. Honestly, every time I sit down with you, you drop a gem. So I'm always informed or educated in some way. So I appreciate our talks, and we've talked all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but the other piece to that is like definitely unpacking the why. But that's something that there's always a cause and an action, a reaction to a reaction, and there's always a why. And I think that is important.
And I think we need to create where we're more in a position of, we can respond.
Right.
We can respond. We don't have to react. Because I can't speak for everybody, but just a few people I talk to who have a similar background, things like that. We look at politicians and it's like, okay, for what? What do you actually do for me?
Right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm experiencing everything I've been experiencing since I was 12.
And my parents have, and my parents have.
And I'm 40 now. So it's that's what I would like to see, where there's more conversation around exactly what it is people are doing. That's what these are all about. It's learning about people.
Right.
And my theory is as well, if people don't have time to do it personally, then I'll film it and give it to them.
Exactly.
That's
watch it in your off time.
Watch it in your off time.
Put it in your background when you're doing whatever you gotta do. No, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask, what are your thoughts about the atmosphere in general in the country? What is your thoughts specifically? What does the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you specifically, if anything? And do you feel that it's becoming commercialized?
Well, I think the Black Lives Matter means movement and organization literally means what it's like. Our lives matter. Like, I'm a Black woman and my life matters because traditionally we know that it hasn't, and we see today with the response of Brianna Taylor.
Well, it has mattered, but just to a certain extent that fit a particular agenda.
Yes, right. It hasn't mattered to. It hasn't mattered to the extent that we are no longer being, brutalized and victimized and taken advantage of in a lot of instances. Yeah. But that's what it means to me in like the simplest way. Like my life actually matters, and it could. I also think that the movement means different things to different people, but I literally take it at face value of like my life matters. And that's why when there's a rebuttal to it, it's like, why is there? Because I don't see where there's space to even refute that. And the question to like, has it become commercialized? I don't necessarily think so. Like, I think that you can't I feel like when you're talking about a group of people that have been marginalized and disenfranchised, you can't like commercialize it because it's literally what we're living. Like it's live like Black Lives Matter. Like I'm living the reality like today. Like I don't. Do you mean like you think it's become performative or like?
Yes.
Okay. No, I think protest and demonstration and all that. I think that's necessary. Like, I think everyone has a different role in overthrowing certain leadership or certain systems. But I think that there is room for every type of advocacy and protest. Like, I think there is room for performative protest. Like, people are gonna, paint Black Lives Matter on their back and like lay on the ground. Like that's performative, but it's also valuable. It's valuable in the same way where that there's a person that's running for office and wins office and then now is a strong advocate of Black Lives Matter and can actually impact the policy. Like all of that is necessary because it wasn't just MLK up there. Like, there's so many different reasons and there's so many different support systems that need to happen, at the same time for change to actually happen.
So let me ask, do you believe the political system as we know it, the court systems as we know it, DCF, DY, the countless sectors of the system, do you believe that they were designed with us in mind?
Oh, no.
Okay, with that...
Oh, well, yes.
Yes.
Definitely with us in mind, but to oppress us.
Okay.
Yes.
With that said, I often hear people use the word dismantle the system.
Mm-hmm.
They use dismantle and reform often in the same sentence.
You try to throw the whole system away.
Yeah. My question is, do you at all feel like you're perpetuating and enabling what has always been by even participating in politics when you know the politics as it works still does not work for us and it will never probably work for us in its current?
Okay, so there's definitely present schools of thought that think we need to just throw the whole system away and start from scratch. Like I totally believe that if we do that, we're losing a lot of the context. We're losing a lot of the realities of us having to how do I say this? I do think this is a very interesting question and I'm just like I haven't put much thought into it. But I do think reform is possible and I do think once we elect leadership that has the same, has our best interests, is able to center and convene and connect with Black voices, then we could provide the reform that we need to see. And the way we counteract bad policy is good policy. So I do think it's possible to reform the system while within it. And that's my perspective. And I also, like I said, there's also the school of thought that like literally politicians can't do anything because they're working in a system that's racist. And, law enforcement can't do anything because they're working in a system that's racist. That's also a school of thought, so it's like those whole system win. But I do think we can.
Because I've always wondered when it comes down to the enabling piece and the just be patient piece. Do you ever feel like we're begging?
I think that, I don't think that it's necessarily, I would say we are asking for permission, for sure, because we do not have the ultimate power of making the changes that we want to see. So I don't necessarily think it's begging, but I do think we're asked, like, I'm tired of it. I think we're all just at the pace where, we're tired of having to ask. We're definitely there. But I don't think it's necessarily, begging. But I also think that there's so many people that, look like me that they're just not as present as I hope. And I feel like once there is, and I also hate saying this too. Once there is a unification and a unified front, then we're able to make a lot more of the decisions that we need to be making.
So let me ask, how do you feel like Black Boston can shed some of its territorialness? And
I haven't experienced that, but also it's because I'm and we talk about this too, I am new to the political scene, so a lot of the stuff is I'm coming in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, because I traditionally have the background of community organizing through nonprofits and being a young person, and now entering the space of leadership of color. I'm amazed by all the work leadership is doing, I do see a lot of collaboration happening, but I definitely feel maybe more collaboration, and there's so many leaders that are working on so many things, probably in silos or by themselves. But once it's we all want to every mission of every Black leader is to improve the lives of Black people in Boston. That's just the bottom line. And so once we all know that's what we want to do.
I don't personally agree with that.
I think they want to. There's no, and also because they're also Black. So it's you want to improve your life and the lives of your your loved ones.
Hopefully you do if you're still living amongst Black people.
Well, that's
that's
the other thing. But whatever the path looks like, that's what you traditionally you want to do, is improve the lives of people that look like you. It's just usually how do we go about doing that. But there also was you can agree to disagree, you can collaborate and still agree to disagree. Okay, so I can't work on this project with you, but I can work on this with this person because we could collaborate and we could make sure X, Y, and Z happen.
I want to collaborate on a policy that says all interns should be paid.
Okay, so they need to give us more money. Because honestly, I think all interns should be paid. I also think that because I was an intern for a long time.
That is a great slave trade.
It's free labor. It is. But I don't want to sound corny, but it is experience. But a little bit about my story. I really quit my job, my high-paying job at Harvard, and I interned for Michelle. I was you don't have to pay me. Because I was so miserable. I was that's not where I need to be. Mm-hmm. I was working on my degrees in communication, but I wasn't really, I said, I was going back to being my authentic self. I wasn't able to be myself. Yes. I cannot work in an environment where I couldn't be myself, and that's also a luxury. So I also realized that was a privilege I had. I had the support of my family, so it allowed me to be able to take to not get a paying job. thankfully it ended up working out and I ended up getting a paid job by Michelle. But I do agree, like, we need to be paying interns because they also have, life, like life responsibilities, like, and they also, want to make sure they're pushing themselves to, have a, great quality life. Like, they should be able to feed themselves.
Absolutely. What do you think in general about mental health, and specifically in the Black and Brown communities? What can we do a little bit better to help raise awareness around destigmatizing and just, that it's, and I don't even mean like, you have to go to a therapist, but maybe you get acupuncture, maybe you smoke weed, whatever you do to deal with your particular whatever. How do you think we can do that?
Honestly, mental health is like, mental health also looks different to everyone.
Yes.
And I also think that acknowledging it is half of the feat. But I also think that the role of electeds and the role of leadership is to make sure that the other aspects of their life are being attended to. So, like,
are you hearing this, politician?
Yes. Like, they're responsible for making housing affordable so they don't have to stress about housing.
If you can't create room for someone to breathe,
exactly,
they're never going to be able to get ahead.
Right, and they're not going to be able to address the varying degrees of mental health concerns that are happening within their own being. Like, it's not going to be their priority. It never will be their priority if they have no place to sleep.
Yes.
It will never be their priority. So, I think that first and foremost, addressing the aspects, like the bare minimum, food on the table, roof over the head, addressing that first. And then I think that's when, once you are able to breathe, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I still have this level of anxiety about things. And you're able to then identify that and unpack it with maybe a therapist or with maybe even it starts off as a friend, because a lot of the problem is that we're not even talking about it in the sense of, like, that's not how we talk about mental health. Like, I have anxiety. No, like, how we talk about it in my community with my generation, like, I'm about to get crazy on this guy because he's doing whatever. So once we start naming things in the correct way, and then once we start, actually identifying them, and we're training people how to do it, because if I'm talking to my friend and she's always agitated and she's always ready to cuss out some guy, I'm like, maybe we need to see somebody about that, or maybe there needs to be some resources for you, because a large part of like having mental ailments or addressing mental health is a lot of it. I feel like is other people identifying it, or like other people helping you with the process, because it's hard. You see yourself every day the same way, like when you look in the mirror, like you see yourself every day. So it's like, it's hard to identify new things about yourself.
Yes.
But
you see through your same filter.
Exactly. So educating educating everyone and naming it actually what it is, and learning the names, because I am finding out new names to people's reactions and feelings and mental states every day. So once I'm learning them, I'm able to more likely be like, maybe I should like sit down today and talk to myself about whatever is going on, or I'm realizing this in my friends more. So I definitely think those two pairing, like addressing the overarching basic necessities that people need, and then informing people on how to identify the actual feeling or emotion.
So last question. Do you believe a healthy mentor is important, and what is a mentor?
Oh my gosh, yes. I just posted about this not too long ago. I think that, I think as a young person, as a 26-year-old, I need to have multiple mentors. Like, I don't think there's like one ultimate being of like, this is who like shows me finances, shows me, healthy relationship building, or how to deal with families or one-off problems. Like, I think there needs to be multiple people in spaces, like different issues in your life. Like I literally think when I talk to you, I'm always enlightened in some way, shape, or form. So like, that is a form of mentorship. Like, if I talk to you and I get like some nugget of knowledge, that's a mentor to me. Like, that's someone that I can go to for that, outlet. So I think that it's important for everyone to have a mentor, no matter what your age is. And I also think it's important to have intergenerational mentorship. So like,
good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
It's important because a lot of it is like, you've been around the block. You're 50, 60 something, whatever, and now I'm 26. I'm new to the block, like I said. Like I'm just a year and a half, 2 years, maybe a year into politics, and I appreciated a lot of the mentorship that I have received, but I wish there was a lot more of like people that were like, okay, Brianna, let me show you how to do this, or let me show you what my experience was, and you can take it or leave it.
Yes.
But I'm gonna tell you what it was, or this is just a context on what happened in Boston during this time, because also like I don't have the luxury of my parents being politically engaged. Like they weren't. Like my mother was an immigrant from Haiti. The Haitian government is trash, so like she always viewed government as like something that was like this tyranny, and it's like it was a completely different way we view government here. So that immediately there was a distrust, and there was immediately not necessarily like a love for government, but I love the fact that we could like it's something that we could galvanize to get power. Like I do love the fact that there's so much possibilities, but I don't actually like the way the systems are. And then my father, he just grew up in Roxbury, not traditionally engaged with politics either. Like that's not. It wasn't. He didn't see it. He didn't see himself. Especially when he was growing up, he definitely didn't see himself in government.
Yes,
so he was like, okay, so like it's not applicable.
And that's what I think. I mean, look, everyone's going to choose their own choice,
right?
But my theory is, let's at least give everyone as many options as possible.
Exactly. Bombard them with options.
Bombard them with options.
Literally, and then take whatever suits your lifestyle or situation the best. But the bare minimum is creating that pathway, like creating multiple pathways. And
the breathe, and that comes through that breathing.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you. I love doing these. You weren't even.